So welcome and good evening to another edition of Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh of Globespan. And with us tonight is the technical advisor, Mr. Devin Bissoon. Tonight we are discussing, November 3rd, we are discussing the role of the opposition in good governance in Guyana, and more specifically, having a more effective opposition in Guyana. With us tonight are four very distinguished gentlemen. Three of them are from political parties, and one is from the Elections Commission. So I will introduce them. Mr. Lenox Shuman, who is the leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, LJP. Dr. Vishnu Bandhu, who is the leader of the United Republican Party, URP. We are supposed to be joined by Mr. Jonas, Timothy Jonas, of the ANUG in New and United Guyana, he's the chairperson of ANUG. And our fourth distinguished guest tonight is Mr. Vincent Alexander, who is a commissioner of the Guyana Elections Commission. I am almost tempted to say he was also leader of a political, but he never was. And quote unquote, I think Mr. Alexander is unaligned politically of political parties. So, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. Let us begin. Well, before we begin, let me wish everyone a very happy Diwali. I think today is the second or third evening of Diwali. Tomorrow will be the main evening, quote unquote Diwali as per se in Guyana, which is a national and public holiday. So, a happy Diwali to all. So let's begin. First, if you could define the role of the opposition in Guyana. So we have, I'll start out with the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Lenox Shuman. Would you like to take on that?
Vishnu, let me say it's good to see you again. Vincent, you as well. And sorry, does Vishnu? Bandhu. I'd like to welcome him on board also. Let me also say happy Diwali to all of you and to the viewers and listeners out there. Hopefully it's truly a day of light. We start off with a topic, and I want to apologize to you and the panelists and the viewers. Technically, I was not supposed to be here, but because of a scheduling mishap, I have to depart shortly. But let me give you my little 2 cents as we start here. The role of the opposition in good governance. About 2 weeks ago, I met the Honorable Joseph Harman, the leader of the opposition. And that was one of the main topics that we spoke about. How do we become an effective opposition? An effective opposition is technically a government in waiting. If you cannot be a government in waiting, you cannot present the people with the kind of confidence that you are a government in waiting, then you offer no check per se to the administration. Yes, you've got a series of parliamentary committees. Take, for example, the Public Accounts Committee, a very important committee that will do its work to publicize what they would have found in the public accounts. But that in itself does not really speak to a government in waiting. The opposition in itself, being a government in waiting, now has the responsibility to always be on the heels of the government. That if the government slips one bit, that they should think that they should walk cautiously and carefully. That if they slip one bit, there's a government that is just there waiting to take their place. Opposition politics in itself, it's got a long history politically throughout the world. And I think it is very important, considering this juncture in Guyana where we are, we're on the precipice of tremendous economic growth. So for us, having an effective opposition, without an effective opposition, if I were to say, you cannot hold the government to account. It becomes difficult to force the government into a position of discomfort where they have to change their ways. They have to change the MO for institutions and how they deliver service. So with weak oppositions, you don't find that kind of drive. You don't find improvement. You don't find people performing to their full potential. I'll leave it there for now and give the other panelists an opportunity.
Dr. Bandhu, what do you think is the role of the opposition in Guyana? Yes. Mr. Shuman.
Opposition should always be holding the government accountable at all times. Hold them accountable. We in the United Republican Party have been trying that. We are putting out press releases and so forth, but the major newspaper does not seems to want to carry the parties out of Parliament any news from them, because we have been calling on the government for accountability on all these handouts what they say they're giving, and bringing the awareness to people that whatever the government give you, it is yours. It is your own money, because even if they borrow it from somewhere and give it to you as a handout, you have to pay it back. It's not free, and people have to understand that we get nothing free in Guyana, right? We are here. There's so much we are trying to do, but we are not getting the kind of publicity what we ought to get. We're sending the news to the newspaper. You find some of the other small Facebook people and so carry some of our thing, but we can't get through to the newspaper. Even the same thing that happens in the up news section with the Chronicle and so forth, the same thing happening with the PPP section with the Chronicle. They would not allow, you know, the URP to get their message across there, because they feel threat in that. And, you know, it is very sad to know that what this government had said when they took power in the first place, they are opposite to everything what they said. You know, they are not doing the thing that they ought to do. And I am very, very disappointed at this time. Look, for instance, you know, our president, our vice president, we have a serious the COVID thing in Guyana here. They started going more and more, but our government and our president seems that it had better value to go like in Dubai and all these places, carrying about 20 people, spending $6 million per person to go there, you know, and the vice president going in Africa. Now they're gone to England. And you know what, and money spending all the time, and thinking and go there and telling people that, yeah, you come to Guyana, you know, all of you from the Eastern world, you come to Guyana, we gonna give you all the sugar cane land, and we gonna give you this and we'll give you that, which is very, very unfair to the cane farmers in this country who had bled there since they're born there on those lands. And if you are saying sugar is not making money, why are we closing down the sugar estate and make schemes for houses and things like that? We have all the infrastructure there already, millions of dollars, billions are spent there. You know, why don't we turn to other crops? There's so many crops. Guyana is an agricultural country. There are so many crops.
Okay. So Dr. Bandhu, we could come back to those cases. So let's talk a little now. First, Mr. Alexander, about the role of the opposition. I'm sure you would have studied that in his university days.
First of all, let me join you in wishing all Guyanese are happy Diwali. And hopefully it will be a day of light indeed, and that there will be continuity of that light. The question of the role of the opposition in terms of ensuring that there's good governance is built on an assumption that the country has a political culture that is in consonance with good governance. And I would posit that that is the biggest problem we have in Guyana, that we do not have a political culture that is in consonance with good governance. When we talk of democracy, we reduce democracy to elections. So we have electoral democracy. But when one gets beyond electoral democracy to talk about good governance, which really encompasses the other elements of democracy, which are inclusion, accountability, transparency, ethics, and openness, I think we are lacking. And it seems to be that we do not embrace the culture of good governance. And therefore, it poses a tremendous difficulty for anyone, opposition or otherwise, to get the government to comply with the requirements of good governance. For example, good governance starts with the question of inclusion. It's one of the fundamental elements of good governance. How do you ensure that all of the citizens are included in one way or the other in the decision-making processes of your country? And very often this inclusion is through participation of the opposition in various committees and boards and so forth. We clearly don't have that. And it's almost a policy now that that will not occur unless there are certain preconditions which are met, so that we're not openly embracing good governance. And so really the question is a difficult one because the culture that affects good governance is not restricted necessarily to the government and the party in government. It's a culture that's pervasive. It's a culture that's pervasive. And it is so pervasive that the other elements of our society that can impact are themselves of the same culture. So if we look at civil society and we look at the problems we have in whether it's football or cricket or swimming or whatever, whichever sector, we see that we have generally a problem of good governance. And so basically we are faced with the need for a revolution and a transformation in relation to the very culture that will facilitate good governance. And so the opposition is really hard put in the normal course of things to ensure that there is good governance. You know, I always remember something that I heard when I was a parliamentarian that really bothered me when the Speaker of the National Assembly, when the President Speaker of the National Assembly, who was at that time a parliamentarian, said to us that the government, that the opposition will have its say and the government will have its way. That's what was told to us. And that's a clear indication that there's no commitment to good governance. And there's an example that's in my mind because of what the 7th of November is supposed to be. 7th of November is supposed to have been declared, well, there was a resolution of the National Assembly in 2013, moved by a delegate of the opposition, that we should celebrate the 7th of November as National Villages Day. And it's a multi-ethnic celebration, it's intended to be. That never happened until 2016, when the mover of the motion was in power to make it possible. Clearly not committed to even the decision-making process when it is activated, non-commitment to that process. So that day was never observed, and the Lord knows, even though it came into being in 2016, whether it will be observed this year, though it's a resolution of the National Assembly. So we have serious problems that are beyond merely asking, how can the opposition ensure that there's good governance?
And it would seem from your comments, remarks, that it would apply to whichever party is in government and in opposition.
It's a
culture
of our political culture across the board.
But one of the
may have magnitudes, difference of magnitudes, but fundamentally, it's a defect across the political organizations and even across civil society.
One of the main, okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Bandhu.
One of the main things of good governance is to listen to its people, you know. And in our country, we don't have such a thing. A good government must listen to its people and adhere to the people's wishes. You know, we must be able to do that. A good government is for all the people, treated equally. You know, not a favoritism like what we're having today. And, you know, only then we are able to see a good governance in Guyana, when the government open its arm to all equally in this country.
Mr. Shuman, Mr. Alexander talked about challenges of good governance. Go ahead.
And I wanted to pick this up on somewhat of a fluid note. Thank you. I think Vincent touched on a very important topic there about, you know, the opposition political party structure in itself is countenance on good governance. Yes, I quite agree with that. And one of the things that I've really seen in Guyana, and I'd say in a lot of democracies, is that there's no drive for inclusion. There's no drive to become stronger as a political party. It is a domination of the other or others in this sense. I say that against the backdrop that 3 weeks ago, I wrote the clerk of the National Assembly asking for them to put in the budget enough resources for each parliamentarian, not Lenox Shuman, every single parliamentarian, whether you're in the opposition or in the government benches, to be given enough finances to have one office and one assistant. What that permits all of the parliamentarians to do is that when they come to work, they have with them, and when we go to Parliament, all of the debates that we're going to put forth are debates of substance. If we cannot do that, then what we end up with is this quasi-democracy, quasi-representation that we have. Until we can do that, if you look at it, you cannot expect a parliamentarian who represents the people to go out and spend their own monies to go and do the people's work. The average public doesn't do it, right? You don't go out there and take your very own money and provide it in a charitable manner to everyone else. People have to realize at some point that us as parliamentarians, we also have families, and we have to ensure that their well-being is taken care of. That is where the bulk of our pay goes. Now, where do I find the resources to learn and to interact with the constituents, with the people who voted for me? The only opportunity that I potentially would have is when someone picks up the phone and calls me or interact via social media. Now, if I had an office, or if every parliamentarian had an office, what that permits them to do is for these issues to be channeled through that parliamentary office or through their office as a parliamentarian and sent to the appropriate ministries or ministers or whoever it is, so that you kind of effect change. It is not about which political party is in power and which political party is not. It is about getting the people's work done that they have elected you to do. The unfortunate thing is, the way the structure is developed or built in Guyana is that it seems, or it is built so that it only looks like the government is capable of delivering, which is unfortunate because the opposition, political parties and members of parliament have been elected to represent the people as well. And at any point, any citizen should be comfortable with the idea and thought that they could pick up the phone and call an MP and the MP can direct them. What we do not have in Guyana is such a mechanism. They do it in Canada and they do it in the US. And all those senators and Congress men and women, they have their own office with staff. In Canada, all of the parliamentarians and senators have their office with staff. In the UK and Europe, almost all of the democracies. Why can we not take that model in Guyana? And if you look at those democracies in themselves, they have gotten to that point because of what they did, because of that very proactive step that they took, which is not to feel threatened because I'm empowering someone. I should not feel threatened because I am giving you the resources to operate effectively to hold me in check. In fact, if I can perform this in spite of the resources that you're giving, you've been given, if I can outperform you, then that means now that I am capable of being in government. I'm holding you in check constantly. And that is something that we do not have in this country. To update the public, the letter was sent to Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, Ms. Gail Teixeira. And I will say this without reservation. I don't expect that anything will come of that. I strongly believe that she will simply revert and say the leader of the opposition has been given $37 million to operate his office, use from that, right? So we are expected to take from that $37 million and go out and pretty much have to interact with Joe, which I was happy to do. But here we have the government on the other side that is using state resources to go out and campaign every single day. And no one is holding them in check. There must be, if you empower parliamentarians on the opposition side, what we now have the ability to do is to hold the government in check. So that when they go out there and they're doling out our taxpayer dollars back to us and saying that they're so generous and magnanimous and altruistic and all these things, then we now have an opportunity to track all of those things and to call them out on it. Right now, that is a difficult task.
You're right. I mean, and in my studies about India, both the members of the upper house as well as the lower house, and in Trinidad, the elected members and throughout the Commonwealth, all members of parliament usually get a budget to have an office and a staff. And it's a good move, good effort for you to introduce the concept in Guyana. How exactly it will work, I just don't know, because we don't have this constituency system, unlike in India or Britain or in Trinidad or throughout the Commonwealth Caribbean.
No, but Vishnu, that is incorrect. We actually have two. We've got the PR and the constituency. So there's no reason why you cannot run that system regardless.
Right. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. Ms. Alexander, any commentary on that?
Yes. First of all, it gets back to my original point, the point of commitment. I recall that somewhere around 2010, 2011, thereabout, when IRI for the first time came to Guyana, in their program, one of the things they suggested was that they could finance research assistance for each parliamentarian. This is building on the point that Lenox made. It would then have enabled parliamentarians to come to the parliament better prepared, having gotten research assistants to be engaged in articulating their positions and interrogating the government. IRI was literally chased out of Guyana because they included that in their program. So there is no commitment. And the point both of you raised about constituency is a critical point. Whilst Lenox said we have constituencies, we do not, in effect, have constituency politics. Our electoral system still reduces every candidate to being pulled from a list or put on a list by a political party. If we had a constituency system that allowed for individuals to contest, if we had constituency systems that allowed for single member constituencies, then there would be greater connectivity between the candidate, between the parliamentarian and the constituency, and it would provide a better environment for them to hold the government accountable, because then they'd be able to compete with the government parliamentarian in the particular constituency and be able to represent those people in terms of what's happening in the constituency. And in that regard, Lenox's point about resources is also important, because it means that when you have these constituency parliamentarians and they're resourced, then they'll be able to cover the terrain, be in touch with the people, understand the needs of the people, determine the weaknesses of the system, and make representation where it matters, with the hope that the people themselves will be responsive to them in an electoral process. And so that would create the environment for an opposition that's effective. Now, let me clarify, I'm not necessarily saying we should reduce Guyana purely to a constituency system. I agree that we need, in our circumstances, the two-tier arrangement. But I also feel that given the closeness of the results of elections, that we can make many more constituencies than the 10 which we have. We have 10 constituencies in a place like Region 4, there's 7 parliamentarians, and they don't necessarily come from a particular geographical area. All can come from Georgetown. So it's not a real and effective constituency system. And so what we need to do is really to have as many constituencies as possible, and to have those constituencies demarcated across the country, with the parliamentarian coming from the constituency, because it's another problem we have. Even in our so-called constituency system, you can throw anybody in. The person doesn't have to know the people belong there, care about there, but the party feels that that's where you want the person, or where the person can fit, and you put the person. So our electoral system itself does not lend, so it's not a good platform for the other elements of the democracy which we proclaim to have.
But Mr. Shuman does make a valid point that even without constituency system, each member of parliament should have some assistant.
I'm not contesting that point. In fact, I supported that point when I said that the IRI wanted to give researchers to the parliamentarians, and the government almost chased IRI out of Guyana for that. So I agree with him in that regard. Yeah, but I've moved it to the maximum.
And therefore it would help democracy in Guyana if whichever government it should be, yes, it should be legislated, it should be law that a member of parliament should receive a certain amount of funds in order to hire a staff to help with his or her work. In the United States, I think each member of Congress gets roughly $1.5 million a year to hire staff, and they have their office also paid for by the government. Similarly in India, and in Trinidad as well. So, Mr. Bandhu, we haven't heard much from you. What do you think of this idea of members of parliament getting a budget to help them in preparation of their contribution to parliament, and as well as in representing their quote-unquote their constituents?
Well, I somewhat agree with that, but the member of parliament and the ministers and so they're earning a lot of money. They can spend some of those money too, because I think we are overpaying our member of parliament and government in Guyana. You know, and I think they can able to spend some of those money that they are having. We are a country now growing, and we have to look at every penny that we spend. But we see that our government are blowing a lot of money wastefully outside, you know, and they come up with all these gifts, what they call it, gifts, and you know, and flood reliefs and things like that. People who, you know, who not supposed to get this money are getting, and who supposed to get are not getting, you know. But the few dollars that they're having and they are borrowing all the time, you know, it's not enough for them. So how it will go?
Vishnu, let me take this gander at it, because I don't want for the public to have this point misrepresented in the least. I think what Vishnu Bandhu's statement is, I think there is a certain inaccuracy in it, and Vincent would also know this as an ex-parliamentarian, a previous parliamentarian. The perception that parliamentarians make a lot of money is grossly inaccurate. We make just around $200,000 a month. You take off taxes from that, and you have to use that money to support your family, and you're expected, according to Vishnu Bandhu this time, is to go out and do outreaches to your constituents with that money. How far do you think you're getting? You're barely getting to Santa Mission, if at all. You're barely getting to St. Cuthbert's, which is arguably one of the most accessible communities in the country. You know, you go around Georgetown twice, and whatever money you have, it's done. So I don't want for the public to run away with an idea or a misconception that parliamentarians get paid a ton of money, because we don't. We literally don't. We get paid just around $200,000 a month, and that is it. We don't get other fringe benefits and all of these things.
All right, with that, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue from that.
Are you missing homemade food, snacks, drinks, roti and curries, or have a busy schedule? Then get your favorite curries and roti delivered directly to your home with all from one supplier. Come order your duck, goat, or chicken, fully cooked and ready to eat with dal puri or bus up shut. We also now have chicken tikka masala or lamb vindaloo available with regular naan or garlic naan. Don't forget to add your solo, icy, coconut water, or Nestle drinks to these delicious meals. Select your choice, and load your box and let allfromonesupplier.com deliver directly to your home. All from One Supplier has you covered for all your food. Plus, if you need pepper sauce, curry powders, fish, meat, ghee, and so much more. We also have tasty pastries like pine tarts, cheese rolls, currants rolls, coconut rolls and so much more. Sales are ongoing every week, and your first order is 10% off once you apply the coupon code, Globespan24x7. Log on to allfromonesupplier.com today and purchase. Allfromonesupplier.com is your one-stop shop for all West Indian items, and remember, it's free shipping to all U.S. states.
Travelspan Alaska Cruise is available from May 29th to June 5th, 2022. Enjoy an unbelievable experience with a 7-night multi-glacier cruise. Travel through a beautiful land on a world-class ship and visit the famous Alaskan glaciers up close. This cruise departs from Vancouver and enjoy a tour to several different ports. At the end, you will also have an opportunity for a city tour. Call Travelspan today to book your trip, with affordable payment plans available. In New York, call 212-243-0865. Georgetown, call 227-1701. Berbice, call 337-4287. Trinidad, call 645-1604. Travel plans? Call Travelspan, serving you for 27 plus years. Travelspan Alaska Cruise.
Dave West Indian Products is the only distributor of 100% authentic West Indian products. Dave West Indian supplies fish, vegetables, curry, spices, sodas, and coconut water, plus ghees and much more straight from Guyana and the Caribbean. For all your shopping needs, visit Dave's Guyana Fish and Grocery Market. Dave West Indian products are also available in West Indian stores, Key Food, and allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian has a full line of the most desirable products to fit all your needs. So visit Dave Guyana Fish and Grocery Market on 118th Street on Liberty Avenue, or in Maryland at 7505 New Hampshire Ave, or any West Indian stores, or allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian, your 100% authentic West Indian product.
So, welcome back again. You're watching Globespan 24/7. I am your host and moderator, Vishnu Bisram. Globespan 24/7 is owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh, with our technical advisor tonight, Mr. Devin Bissoon. We are discussing the role of the opposition towards a more effective representation for democracy and good governance in Guyana. With us tonight is Mr. Vincent Alexander, a member of GCOM, former member of Parliament, former registrar of the University of Guyana. And also with us tonight is Dr. Vishnu Bandhu, who is the leader of the United Republican Party, the URP. We were supposed to have been joined by Mr. Timothy Jonas, but for whatever reason, we are having some technical issues with him. So just before Mr. Lenox Shuman had to leave, he was saying that in Guyana, members of parliament do not earn much of an income. It's just about $200,000 per month, which is less than 1,000 US. And Mr. Alexander, 1,000 US is really not much money. Throughout the world, I think members of parliament make substantially more money than 1,000 US a month. In the US, for example, they earn approximately, I think, 170,000 a month, a year. Sorry about that. And that kind of money really should not be used for your political activities. It's really your income for the month to take care of your family, as Mr. Shuman had said. Would you agree?
I agree that the parliamentary salary is insufficient for the work that is required. But I'm not quite sure that the singular problem is the parliamentary salary. I feel that the first issue is the culture, the attitude. If one is not drawn from a constituency and is not identified with a constituency, even if that person is given the resource to get around, you don't have the basis on which to, in fact, do the work that's required. A parliamentarian who is drawn down from a list and put to work in a constituency or put to represent a constituency which he or she does not come from may still be ineffective, irrespective of how much money the person has. So whilst I'm agreeing with Lenox that the parliamentary salaries are insufficient for the work required, I'm saying it is the lack of that work. It's not only a function of the salary, it's also a function of a political system which does not really attach a parliamentarian to a constituency, and therefore does not have built into it an element of good governance, which is accountability, being in touch with the people and being answerable to the people for your actions as a parliamentarian, whether you be in opposition or in government. And so there's a more fundamental flaw in our quote-unquote democracy that does not lend to people, to parliamentarians, seeing themselves accountable because they are not elected by the people. They are drawn from a list. And so if at all they see themselves accountable, they see themselves accountable to the party and the party leader that installed them, rather than to the people. And if they saw themselves accountable to the people, you would get probably not the optimum out of them, but you will get more out of them. I continue to say our system is flawed, our political culture is dysfunctional, and therefore we do not have the framework in terms of how we have structured our arrangements for the realization of good governance, given that we don't have a commitment to good governance.
Mr. Bandhu, just for clarification, Mr. Shuman was saying that the salary for a member of parliament is really low. And you were making the point that the members of the ruling party who are ministers, they get substantially more income, perhaps 4, 5, 6 times more. I don't know the salary, to be quite honest, but it's substantially more.
Yes, I agree with that. Ministers and so on far more payable, you know, in their salary. But also the parliamentary people, they're having car, they're having driver, they're having, you know, different kinds of allowance.
Not all members of parliament, you know, only ministers, only ministers.
Only ministers. Well, yeah. Mr. Shuman has a car and a driver.
Because he's deputy speaker. I think that's the reason why. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But you know, I still think that people can do much more. Parliamentarian can do much more than what they are doing. In spite, he said that they are getting $200,000 a month. You know, and then again, you know, the party choose who they want for this constituency and all these things, which, you know, people in the constituency probably doesn't like even these people, what they choose to put there, because they are not going out there, they are not meeting with the people, you know, they go with a hi-fi way all over the place. You know, I am a parliamentarian, I am this, I am that, and that's what's going on. Nobody is focused. And Mr. Shuman said also that people are not spending their own money and going out there and campaign. I have spent over $200 million already of my own money in this country in campaigning, going out here and there. Look, today even I was going, I went to tuition and was talking to people and this and that. And we are preparing hampers. We are preparing toys for the children. Our plan is to put out at least 1,000 hampers and gift bags for poor people. You know, so I am an example who had been spending money, and I feel strongly if a man going for a high position in government, he must have money. He must not be a pauper. You know, he must have money to spend. You know, because we have a lot of people. We have a lot of people in our government who doesn't have even a proper shirt and pants, and you take them and put them in there, and in the next couple of years, they are billionaire in Guyana. So I don't know where that money coming from.
But Bandhu, a pauper like me means I cannot be involved in politics.
No, you shouldn't be involved in politics. If you're a pauper, you must have money. You know, let us be frank here. Let us say what it is. You know, many of our people that goes in as ministers and things like that, it's only friends and family and so forth, and they make out a little degree. Yes, fine. You know, but what are they really offering to our country? We got a series of things are happening for the year. $25,000 giving to each home in this country. At least they never come to my home. I never get a $25,000.
You didn't get your 25 yet, Mr.
No,
Alexander.
I never get one. When they give Granger the $25,000, they publicize it all over the place. But I never get one as a political leader. A hamper never passed by my home. And many of our people who are in the URP hasn't get their hamper and the flood relief. What I was talking about earlier, people who didn't plant rice get millions. People who plant rice hardly get anything. Livestock, people who have livestock, cow, duck, fowls, and all these things, and they get damaged with them. They haven't yet, and people who don't even have livestock get. And so you tell me what's happening in our country, what's really happening here, you know? And it's a sad, sad situation. Sad situation in our country, you know.
Okay. So let's hear from Ms. Alexander. Poor members of parliament, poor politicians.
I cannot agree with Mr. Bandhu on the question that all parliamentarians must be people of good means. I can't agree with that. It flies in the face.
Well, I apologize. I apologize for that. If I said all, I probably made a mistake. Most of them.
But I think it's a fundamental question, and I'm trying to address it.
Yeah.
In some regards, it flies in the face of our history, where we've had people like Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, who was not a man of means, but who turned out to be a very good representative of the people at the level of the trade union movement and, in fact, in Parliament. But I think there is an element to what Mr. Bandhu has said, which one should observe, and that is, people should not become parliamentarians because they see it as a means of income and a means of social mobility. Because when people become parliamentarians for the income and social mobility, they become more concerned about themselves than they're concerned with the people. So I think that people who become parliamentarians should be comfortable with who they are without being parliamentarians, and therefore not use the office for self-aggrandizement. And in that regard, I think what he's saying makes a lot of sense. We need parliamentarians who are committed to doing parliamentary work, and not parliamentarians who see Parliament as a form of social mobility, income, and therefore become concerned about holding on to those positions, which in Ghana means paying homage to the leader rather than serving the people.
I think that was the point he was making. He was also giving an illustration where a lot of very, very poor, quote unquote poor, people who enter politics after a period of time in government, they become multi-millionaires, if not billionaires. And I think that was the point he was really making.
That's the point. Yeah.
Which in itself is a breach of some of what governance provides for. Because when one talks about good governance, one is expecting a certain level of ethics. And this enrichment that takes place very often takes place through corrupt practices, and therefore is a fundamental breach of good governance.
Well, okay, we have this for 60 years now, you know. People have been misusing the people's fund, and hardly anybody say anything about it. You always have cover up on everything. You know, they make all kind of excuses and things like that, and so we keep on going the same way over and over and over. If a man taking a position in Parliament should be a selfless person, politicians should be a selfless set of people. Don't think about you, think about the people. Because when you took those positions, you swore to it that you will serve your country and your people. And that is my point. You know, most of them, I must say, are not serving their country and their people, they are serving their pockets. That's what's going on in Guyana here. You know, I am in the field, in the political field. Now it's not election, but I go and I visit all over this country, spending my own money all over this country and see how people live. What can we do? What can we advise them to do? How to go on with their lives? You know, because even people going to church today, they can't even pray to God properly because they're hungry. Their stomach needs something. And when your stomach needs something, you can't listen to even the pastor, the pandit, or the mulvi, what is going on in our country. You can go in a place called Tushin, which I went today. You know, I even fell down there. You know, I think I broke my ribs. How you know how hard I fell. And I went there, and if you see the condition what those people live under, right? I don't wish my worst enemy to live under those conditions, what they are living under, right? And I'm telling you, I am walking in all the trenches in this country, all over. I wish that these people who sit down in the parliamentarian and the minister who's sitting in the air-conditioned car and go in the air-conditioned office, go and travel in these areas and see how these people are living. If you really want to serve, go and see how they're living and come up with some solution to better their lives. You know, every part of this country I go, from east to west and north to south, people cry how things bad. How things bad. The last thing that I heard when I leave Tushin this afternoon, a little bottle of oil, what was $400, now is $620. That's the last thing I heard before from one of the people. So, you know, we are in a very, very sad situation. People who are in the top bracket call themselves government. It's the people's money paying them, but they are not serving the people, they are serving themselves.
So let's hear from Mr. Alexander. Tushin as an illustration. He's saying that there's very, very poor representation. The people are not being serviced.
You know, we used to say that all politics is local. All politics is local. As well as we used to say that local government, and local governance is the training ground for politicians. If we examine the landscape now, we will see that very few persons come from the training school of politics. Because if you are involved in local governance, you are naturally in a small geographic area and have that connection with the people. And so when you mature to a higher level, you've already inculcated the culture of connectivity with the people. But what we find these days is that if you do a survey among the people who live in Parliament, I would say many of them are parachuters. They have been parachuted onto the top of the system without having matured up the hierarchy of the system. And so they are not products of what one may refer to as a democratic environment. So they're not practitioners of democracy. They're parachuters, and parachuters are purpose-driven in a sense. And so in a sense, that's another problem our system has. And it gets me back to the argument about the way in which candidates are identified and constituencies and things like that. We do not have a bottom-up system. We have a top-down system, which in some instances have even been embraced by ideological positions in terms of democratic centralism and things like that. And so we really need to look at our politics quite differently, to see community involvement, local government involvement as the training ground and the place from which people are chosen to be parliamentarians. Because if you involve in your community, you've already demonstrated your commitment to the people by virtue of that involvement. But when you are parachuted, you have no track record of commitment. All parliamentarians should have a track record based on their community and non-governmental involvement. The system is terribly flawed. And we have absolutely no discourse about the flawed system. Absolutely none. So that we do not, in the tunnel, we've not seen any light as yet, because no one has entered that tunnel to have that discourse about the dysfunctionality of our political system and where it's leading us.
Mr. Bandhu,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yes.
heard Mr. Alexander, the members of parliament, they don't have any grounding, or not all, but most of them don't have grounding with the community, the local community. He's suggesting that first they should have gone through that system of local governance before being gaining upward mobility as a member of parliament, or even as a regional councillor.
I 100% agree with Mr. Alexander where that is concerned. You have to meet with the people. You have to get that interaction with these people to understand how things go in the before you go to that high level. You know, not because you have a degree of a lawyer or a doctor, you push somebody up there. They doesn't know. A lawyer is not a politician. He has to train to be a politician. A doctor is not a politician. He has to train to be a politician. You know, but our society have a different way of looking at things. You know, if you're a doctor, yes, this is the man. If you're a lawyer, yes, this is the woman. You know, and you're an engineer and all these things. But you check very carefully where all these corruptions are coming from. It's many of the same doctors and lawyers where you're talking about politics. It's all about money and power, Mr. You know, Alexander has said earlier too. You know, it's because of money they are there, not because of they feel that this is my duty is to serve my country and my people. Nobody they don't want to serve the country and the people. They want to serve their pockets. You know, and many people would not like to hear what I am saying. But this is the facts. You can't run away from the facts. You know.
But
all
look, it is the people who choose their members of parliament. It is the people who elect them.
I agree.
It should be.
I agree. The people not electing them to be a member of parliament. The people elect the parties. So the system needs to be revived in this country. You know. Same system as we got like overseas. You want to be a councillor, you want to be a mayor, you must run for that, either which party you're in. You know, run for it and see who the people like and who, because if the people does not like you, no matter how much you try, you will never have the progress. People have to feel that you are their person. You are the person that will make things change for them. And as long as they feel that, bam, definitely you will see progress in our country. Right now, you can't see progress.
You don't think the voters themselves need to reform their thinking about how they vote?
Of course, but we have to educate them and let them understand. We have to educate them and let them understand with simple things what they are talking about, handouts and giving this and giving that. Venezuela has been doing the same attitude they had before they gone into this situation. And we are heading in like that same direction. We're talking about giving away everything what we have to foreigners, and our people are shortchanged in our country. Our people are seriously shortchanged in our country. And nobody has said, the same people who vote for them, if you go anywhere in this country, you hear the same people bad-talking them. But you know what? When the time to vote, they're going to lie again to these people, and the people can't pass the APNU and the PPP because of the lies what they perform all the time, right? Look at place like Skeldon. They have a place called Line Path. The Line Path people called me a few months ago to show me that they have for years and years they have a dump heap next to their house. All rotten things, all dead animal, everything they dump there. And you see, you got thousands of canny crow in that area. They take the dead stuff and they go in the people's house and they do what they have to do up there with them. People can't even get the rainwater from them homes. And you know, those people call me as a political leader. And you know, none one of those at line path when we was campaigning, just to sign a paper for contest election. We had one person in line path sign for us. Today they're calling on us to represent them. And we went and we started representing them. The EPA said now that they are on the verge of moving the dump heap. For years they can't get it done. Now EPA said they will move it. You know, so these are typical examples. When people want you, the people who they vote for, neglect them and they call on you. But I don't mind. I'm a Guyanese and I want to serve my people and my country. That's all.
Let's hear a reaction, response from Mr. Alexander.
Two things. We have made repeatedly this evening the point that the representatives do not serve the people. But I would go further to say that there are many instances in our flawed system where the people do not know who the representatives are. Mm-hmm. They don't know who they are. For a range of reasons, including the fact that they don't originate, they don't reside where they are supposed to be representing. So the people do not know who the representatives are. There's no relationship. The relationship is with the political party, not with the representatives. And the basis for the relationship with the political party is also a problem. The other point I want to make related to what Dr. Bandhu said, that does a lot of work and when it comes to elections, he doesn't get the vote. One needs to understand that in voting in this country, there is tremendous peer pressure, and even threats of violence in various forms if it is discerned that you voted for another party. And the way in which our population is settled, it is very easy to discern that somebody has, in a sense, jump camp. As a commissioner, when I look at the results of our elections, you will see instances where in a particular polling station, 99-point-something% of the people vote for one party. And so it is easy for them to point a finger at the person who did not vote for that party. And believe you me, things can happen to that person. And we have even had a few instances in West Berbice after 2020 elections. And I'm not referring to the Henry issues, where people have become the victims of arson because they were known to have supported a party other than the party considered to be the one to be supported in that area. So, Mr. Bandhu, you will go about doing a lot of good charitable work. And some of those people will genuinely want to vote for you. But when they look over their shoulders and they see the kind of visitation that they might have after voting for you, in their own interests, in their mental health and physical health interests, they will either not vote or they will vote for the party that ensures their security in that community. That's the reality of Guyana. It may be a little different in the communities that are multi-ethnic, but in the communities that are not multi-ethnic, that's a real threat.
Yeah,
Mr. Alexander, yeah, I was asking Mr. Alexander, do you think that we have democracy in Guyana?
I have said this before, and I said at the beginning of the program, we have an element of electoral democracy. Beyond that, we are far off from being a democracy. We have an element, I wouldn't even say the totality of electoral democracy, because our electoral system itself is so dysfunctional that it does not lend to the growth of democracy.
Yeah.
So our democratic, our superstructure is built on a foundation which is itself flawed. And so the superstructure cannot stand up. We do not have in totality democracy. When we talk about return to democracy, in some regards, in all regards, all that is being talked about is the electoral system, which is itself.
Well, we can't talk about returning to democracy if he doesn't understand democracy and doesn't know what is democracy.
Well, all of that.
It's only lip saying in Guyana about democracy. We have the biggest dictatorship in this country. You know, we don't have nothing called democracy here. It is no democracy. It's all dictatorship.
And by that, I think what you mean is that the citizens, the civic groups and so forth, are not being given an opportunity to participate in whether it is the legislative process, the implementation process of laws and so on and so forth. So how can we reform? How can we change the system to make it quote unquote democratic and make politicians accountable?
The honest way we can change this is try to go about each political party, even the young parties and all of them, go out and try to educate people and let them understand what is happening in our country. And you don't have to go to university to understand what is wrong and right. You know, you don't have to know to read and write to know what is wrong and right. You know, people need to know these things. You know, that this is the government job. The government are being paid by the citizens of this country, and it is their job to do whatever it takes to develop this country, and that's what you are paying them for, right? But what we are doing, this government here, it's more jobs they create in this country. It means more money in their pockets, you know, to help to fill that pockets. And we have people in our government. It's not only looking for a nice house in here. They will look for a mahal in this country. They're looking for having resort. They're looking for having a bank account overseas and houses and property overseas. You know, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for the people. You know, and we have to go out there. We have to spend our hard-earned money privately and go and try to educate people and show them this is so and this is not a just. You are not getting anything free in Guyana, right? Look, our cost of living is so high now. Our fuel, our government had promised us will go down 50%. Our fuel rise now up to 42% right now. Our cost of living, I think, about 13% or more. You know, everything goes up. A simple gas that you light your stove with was $33 a bottle. Then it got to 36. Today is 41. And we boast and brag that we are the largest oil producer now in the world. One of the largest in the world. Why, if we are so big in this oil, why did oil money don't come and try to bring down the people cost of living where they can have a more comfortable? So instead of us getting rich by the oil we're boasting, We become poorer and poorer and beggar every day in this country of ours. So tell me where the justice is in our country. There's no justice.
Yeah, so Mr. Alexander, he's saying that accountability also involves some kind of subsidies to the poor in particular.
Well, in societies, you have issues of inequality, and you can have policies that are intended to create some degree of equality by what we refer to as redistributive justice. Because inequality is not always a function of the individual who is not industrious and doesn't want to do better. There are structural economic issues that can lend to those circumstances. And so systems that are normally in normal societies are put in place to redistribute in a manner that allows those who are at the bottom of the ladder to at least come up to a minimum situation. But I wanted to go back to some points made by Dr. Bandhu. We are victims also of the smallness of our society. And one of the points I was making earlier about the way in which if you go and vote and so, that's a reflection of the smallness question. Everybody knows everybody. But the smallness question also impacts the way in which the private sector and civil society operates. The state has such a great stake, or the government has such a great stake in the economy, is that everybody who wants to get something done in the economy looks over his or her shoulder to government. If the government didn't have such a large stake in the economy, people would have much more freedom to act without having to consider what are the repercussions if they take actions which are not pro-government. And we have had instances. I remember in the 90s, during that period of turbulence, a civil society group came together, and these were pretty neutral people, even neutral in terms of their ethnicity, came together and attempted to mediate on one hand, see what new structures we can have to deal with the problems. And I'm telling you, after a short while, they placed their tails between their legs and crawled back into their corners and their holes and have never emerged. But those are some of the people who were positioned by virtue of being equidistant from the political parties to attempt to create an environment that would be a political environment that is more fair and more just. So we are victims of our smallness. Now, in that regard, we always talk about solutions. And it's funny enough in society, some solutions are not engineered. While the society seeks to do one thing, other things emerge in that scenario. So even as we talk about the growth of our economy, and we talk about people coming into our society and things like that, we may well unwittingly or wittingly be setting the basis for an evolution away from the ill effects of smallness, the ill effects of partisan politics, and the ill effects of what Dr. Jeffrey would refer to as our bicommunal society.
All right. So in the interest of time, if you may summarize, where do we go from here? What can we do for more effective opposition for better governance?
Well, in some regards, I think those persons who are, undoubtedly there's some people who are committed to good governance, undoubtedly some people, they might not be the majority. But I think they have to be able to put pressure on the political parties themselves, so that the parties themselves can go through some kind of transformation. From time to time, we've seen some evidence of those attempts, so that the second thing is that there's a lot of rhetoric about good governance. And my own view is that where there's rhetoric, people who are not committed to good governance are sometimes trapped by their rhetoric. So the more we elevate the call for good governance, and the more they see it necessary to say to us, yes, we agree with good governance, it's the more that they may be trapped by it. And therefore, we may find that there is an emergence of more elements of good governance. And I might even argue that, controversially, that one may have seen some of that in the last regime. I'm not saying they did everything right, but I'm saying that there were more instances where even when things were done wrong, they were called out, and as a consequence of being called out, had to try to respond in one way or the other. And I think in some regards we have retrogressed. So we need the kind of individuals and leadership that would be committed to and try to impact the growth and development of the parties in terms of good governance. And we need civil society, even though it may be costly, in the long-term interest of our society, to take a stand on these issues where they are committed. It may lead to some material consequences, but it will eventually be to the benefit of Guyana. We have to start being medium and long-term, rather than short-term in the things that we do.
And constitutional reform?
An element of it. Constitutional reform will be an element. But you need to understand that when we have a constitution, it's not just a question of the constitution. It's a commitment to the realization of what's in the constitution. Because I can point you to a few things. If you read our constitution, you'll see some words like accountability that were consciously placed there by those who wanted certain things to evolve. But it hasn't necessarily impacted the way that we thought it should. So yes, constitutional reform is also important, particularly in the area of our electoral system that can refashion the architecture of our politics. That architecture needs to be refashioned. And if that architecture is refashioned, we can have the emergence of something new.
Dr. Bandhu, before we close up,
yes.
Any suggestions on how we reform the system?
Well, the first thing, we have been always talking about constitution. Since 1992, we have been talking about constitution, and every government, when they go in there, they tell you that, yeah, we are going to reform the constitution, but when they stepped in, they forget about what they say about reforming constitution. Because you know why? Because of greed. Our biggest problem in this country is greed. All these politicians are so greedy. They want everything to be their own, their family, their friends, you know, and that is not right. So we ought to try to take away this greed from ourselves, and we ought to thought that, put in our mind that we are here to serve. We are here to serve. You are going in government, you are being paid to serve, not paid to be greedy and have your own friends and family and put them into places where you want. We have a serious problem coming up in Guyana. And you see it all over the place. You know, we have a racial problem right now facing us. We may have a religion problem facing us very shortly with what is happening in Guyana. You know, and if we don't look out, we'll be in big trouble here in this country.
Okay, so Mr. Bandhu is saying that first of all, not all politicians are greedy. Yeah, there's some who are genuine and who are there to really service the people. But he's saying that there needs to be greater altruistic behavior among politicians, and greater accountability. So just to wrap up, any final words, Mr. Alexander?
Yeah,
I agree with him that we need more altruism. I do agree with him. I think that a lot of our problems are, like I said in the very inception, our political culture, and we need to have a transformation of that culture. But even as I say this, I am of the view, given what history has taught us, that even outside of a commitment, that we sometimes, by virtue of the things we do in pursuit of our own interests, may be creating an environment that itself would lead to a transformation that we would not have envisaged as we do the things we do. So all is not lost.
Dr. Bandhu, final word?
Yes. First of all, I would like to wish you and the public out there happy Diwali. Tomorrow is Diwali. And I thank you very much for your generous job, Dr. Bisram, for what you have done tonight. Nohar and the technician, and Mr. Alexander and Shuman and all of you, I thank you very much. And may God bless all of you and keep on the good work. Thank you.
I thank you all for taking time out of your very, very busy evening for spending it with us this evening. Without your presence, it would not have been possible. I also want to express the public's appreciation to Mr. Nohar Singh for hosting and funding this particular program, Mr. Devin Bissoon for spending time as technical advisor. And again, happy Diwali to all. Tomorrow being Diwali, may you be enlightened, not only with physical lights, but internally as well, for a better and more prosperous 21-22. Thank you. Good night all.